This episode of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine was made possible by contributions from slaves like you. Thank you very much.
Now, as I understand it, you want to firebomb the town of Cedar Creek, California, population 2,600, with something called a fuel-air bomb, the most powerful non-nuclear weapon in our arsenal. The way it works, it explodes, sucks in all available oxygen to the core, vaporizes everything within a mile of ground zero, men, women, children, and one airborne virus. Destruction complete, case closed, crisis over.
It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine.
Good morning, slaves, and welcome to another edition of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine, the show where pigs fly.
I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky.
I am your host, the Stimulator, and while large segments of the North American population have been distracted by the racist and straight up batshit fears of contracting Ebola,
meanwhile, we have a border that is so porous, Ebola or ISIS or Ebola on the backs of ISIS could come through our border.
an even more contagious outbreak has been sweeping the globe, which experts have dubbed
Insurrecto-Riotosis.
symptoms of this affliction include accelerated heart rate, social alienation, distrust of politicians, pyromania, sudden onset of class consciousness, and uncontrollable bursts of euphoric rage. Studies showed that repeated exposure to peeps infected with
Insurrecto-Riotosis.
can lead to the development of full-blown
Acute, neuropathic, austerity-resistant, chronic, hyper-insurrecto-social maladjustment.
and at that point, the only cure is total fucking freedom.
Violence on Hollywood Boulevard as a man smashes the windows of an LAPD officer's car in the middle of the day.
In France, authorities have been struggling to contain a recent outbreak of
Riotosis.
in the cities of Nantes, following the police murder of 21-year-old eco-defender Rémi Fraisse on October 26 by a not-so-non-lethal concussion grenade. Nantes, located on the west coast of France, is well known as a hotbed of anti-capitalist resistance, owing to its proximity to Lazade, a sprawling open-air occupation located on farmland that the French fucking government wants to bulldoze to build a fucking airport. On November 1st, a week after Rémi's death, several hundred pissed-off militants took to the streets in Nantes where they burned dumpsters and clashed with the armored anti-riot pigs of the Gendarmerie Mobile. Clashes were also reported in Rémi's hometown of Toulouse. The contagion soon spread to Belgium, the birthplace of waffles and Jean-Claude Van Damme. On November 6, over 100,000 peeps hit the streets in Brussels to show their anger to a proposed package of austerity cuts that include a public sector wage freeze, an increase to the national retirement age, and cuts to public spending. The demonstration, which was organized by a coalition of trade unions and left-wing opposition parties, started out as a peaceful march, but soon escalated into pitched street battles with the Belgian popo. When the pigs attempted to disperse the crowds with tear gas and water cannons, pissed-off workers responded by standing their ground, flipping over and torching cars, and dropping a number of pigs with well-aimed projectiles. Organizers of the demo have promised a series of escalating actions over the next month, all leading up to a nationwide general strike on December 15th. EU technocrats are freaking the fuck out over the prospect that this virus could soon spread to other countries, as a number of other governments are expected to announce austerity budgets in the coming months. In Mexico,
Insurrecto-Riotosis
is quickly turning into a full-fledged pandemic, as protests demanding the safe return of 43 education students kidnapped on September 26 continue to escalate dramatically. On Wednesday, November 12th, in Chilpancingo, the capital of Guerrero, members of the state teachers union stormed the Congress building and lit up the main legislative chamber. This fiery ya basta to the local political elite came just one day after at least 500 protesters torched the state headquarters of the PRI, the country's traditional ruling party, who many Mexicans accuse of being in cahoots with paramilitary drug cartels. In the resulting clashes with the police, protesters snatched up the local deputy public security chief and used him as a bargaining chip to secure the successful release of several of their detained comrades. This outbreak has spread from its epicenter in Guerrero and has now begun to engulf the entire fucking country. In the neighboring state of Michoacán, student protesters have also done their part fucking up the local PRI offices and occupying the airport in the state capital of Morelia. And in Mexico City, massive demonstrations of tens of thousands of people have blocked major roads and battled with federal police and the military. Despite the country's attorney general's claim that the 43 students are dead, the protesters are calling bullshit and have been resolute in demanding their return. And the explosive protests show no signs of stopping anytime soon.
It's really good that people are mobilizing at a national and international level. People are rising up. Why? Because justice needs to be served for everything that's going on in our country, in this state. We will be here until there is a result, until there is justice for the fallen students. Until the missing students come back, we will be here supporting their families. This is the issue. And we will continue until there is an answer.
And in other news, on Thursday, November 13th, Wal-Mart employees in Los Angeles staged their first ever sit-down strike against the mammoth retail giant, demanding that the multi-billion-dollar corporation pay them a livable fucking wage. Instead, these strikers and their supporters were met with a detachment of over 100 porkers from the LAPD, dressed in riot gear and flanked by a pork chopper, and over 50 people were arrested for failing to disperse. Walmart workers planned a series of escalating actions leading up to Black Friday, the depraved annual tradition where frenzied mobs of Americans literally kill each other as they race to get their paws on discount DVD players and the latest video game consoles. Organizers are planning actions at 1,600 Walmart stores. We'll see how it goes. And finally, building off recent revelations about sleaze bucket dipshit Gian Gomeshi, a CBC radio host who used his B-celebrity status to manipulate and sexually assault a slew of women, a massive fight back against sexual violence and rape culture has blown up all over social media. Women from all over Turtle Island are speaking out about the overwhelming prevalence of sexual assault in their day-to-day and have caused a huge shift in the conversation around gendered power dynamics, sharing stories of their everyday examples of facing harassment and assault under the hashtags like "been raped, never reported." While it is a small step in the fight against patriarchy, this conversation has shown the power that women can claim by seizing control of the narrative around the shit that they normally have to deal with in silence. Solidarity with all women and non-gender conforming folks who have to deal with douchebag piece of shit dudes on the reg. As you saw in the headlines, the land of tacos has been exploding like an overstuffed bean burrito this past month. The yet unresolved disappearance of 43 students in the state of Guerrero has peeps burning all kinds of shit, And since the Mexi-pigs are not able to chill motherfuckers out, the shitting resident of the country booked it to China to seek the protection of his pal Xi Jinping. As this good-for-nothing taco smuggler was gangsta chilling in Beijing, peeps upped the ante and promised to burn a government building for every missing student.
Count. My pleasure. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, you get the fucking idea. Anyway, to find out more about the rebellion that's rocking Mexico, I spoke with Andalusia Knoll, a journalist with the autonomous media collective Subversiones, who's been reporting from Guerrero. Hey Anda, how the fuck are you?
Hello, and thanks for having me on the show.
So, who are these 43 students and who the fuck are the normalistas?
They are badass young people from rural poor towns in Mexico who have the only access they could get to education really is to go to the Ayotzinapa Normal School in Guerrero. And they continually fight for their right to exist, for the school to exist, because the government continually wants to shut it down. It's part of a tradition from the Mexican Revolution that has been existed, the school, for 88 years, and it has kind of like a pillar of thought. It's a socialist school. It's part of the Federation of Campesino and Socialist Students, and the students do things like, take over capitalist corporations' trucks to get their products because they say that their school doesn't get enough money, and they take over buses because they don't have enough transportation. So they have a very anti-capitalist approach and take direct action that most anarchists in the US or Canada or whatever could only dream of. Last night we're traveling in the caravan. We didn't have enough gas, so we spent an hour at the toll booth stopping every bus that came by, and the students then drained the gas from the buses and put them into the bus that we're traveling on. These students, they're a sore thumb for the government because they're always protesting the government's privatization plans, demanding that the government respect them, and they're critical and they're conscious, and the government doesn't like them.
There are lots of fucking mass murders in Mexico. So why is the reaction to this one so big?
Mexico is a mass grave, as what many activists and priests and so on have been saying. Right now, there's mass murders in Mexico all over. Over 120,000 people have been killed since the war on drugs started 8 years ago. And there's over 25,000 disappeared people. But the reason why this is such a big deal is because these students are organized, and their families and the other students at their school, we're not going to just let this get swept under the rug. And I think the other main thing is that this is just one of the very clear examples where there's no way for people to write them off. They're part of a drug cartel, even though the government tried to do that. But people know that these are students, and they were attacked by the government for being students, and that this wasn't a drug, they can't disguise that it was a drug cartel. It was the government. It was the municipal police that opened fire on them. And whether or not they turned them over to a drug cartel, it was that they were in the hands of municipal police when they disappeared. And
what does the war on drugs have to do with this shitty situation?
So the war on drugs had just made Mexico increasingly insecure. As I mentioned, there's tens of thousands of people have been killed. And it's just completely hypocritical because here in Guerrero, there's a lot of community police forces, and instead of the government respecting that these community police forces actually help reduce crime, they arrest the leaders and charge them with kidnapping when they try to detain any people that actually are causing harm to these communities, the drug cartels and organized crime, etc. And then there's an increased militarization, and there's just an increased corruption. There's, this Barca, the mayor of Iguala, he's not the only one who's totally in bed with organized crime. And this is not just happening in Guerrero, it's happening in Michoacan, it's happening in Tamaulipas, it's happening all over the country, that the politicians directly work with organized crime.
Is there revolutionary potential in this uprising?
We can say that there is. People are really fed the fuck up. I think one thing is important to note is Guerrero is a guerrilla state. It has a long history of guerrillas, and many of them have emerged when there were other massacres. And so this is possible that, this time people are saying that they are willing to do whatever they need to do to find the 43 missing students, and, place blame on the government. And people are saying they are fed up. If, peaceful means don't work, they are ready to take up arms. I've heard many people say that on the trip. I'm just seeing, all over the country, people are taking over municipal buildings. They're shutting down schools. They're shutting down airports. This is the phrase many people use. It's the drop that spilled the glass, because people just can't take this level of insecurity anymore, and they can't believe that the government would assassinate students like this.
Anything else you want to add?
It's really important to note that, how wrong the international press gets it, always saying like, oh, the police opened on these students because they kidnapped buses. The students have agreements with the bus companies and had an agreement to go get the buses that day. And no, the students were not protesting, contrary to popular belief. They actually went to get the buses to do some of their fieldwork activities for the school, and then also to go to the October 2nd protest. So that's just one thing about, there was no violent clash, as the international media loves to portray it. And I just say everyone should do what they can in their own communities and try to support the students, organize protests, take to the streets, and demand actually that the government actually looks for the students alive and not just looks for them dead. That's what the families and the students are crying for.
Thanks, Andalusia. And that about us for this edition of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine. In these times of mass brokenness, it's nice to see peeps dropping coins into my jar to keep this review of Revolt rolling. So, big ups to Justin, Robin, Garrick, Sky, Jade, Colleen, Micah, Marcel, Raster, Steven, Carlos, Grayson, Serena, Adrian, Jan, Samantha, Jason, Zachary, Katie, Emily, Thomas, Michael, Anton, Kirk, Tom, Laura, Christoph, Claudio, Kial, Emily, Catherine, Max, Preston, Elizabeth, Audrey, Alexander, Gregory, and Sarah. Tejate. I also want to welcome the newest members of the Ta Conspiracy. Artists Ranko, Catherine, and Renzo. Wachinango. I also want to let y'all motherfuckers know that Submedia TV is releasing our best stuff DVD called Submedia.tv, a decade of subversion. And we're throwing a big fucking party in Montreal on December 18th to celebrate. But if you can't make it up here and want to throw your own fucking party, shoot me an email to stimulator@submedia.tv and we'll promote it on our site. If you found that there were not enough things on fire on the show, my cursing has gotten sloppy, you want to get my emails every month, or you want to get this fucking show as a podcast, just visit my fucking website, stimulator.tv. And remember, the only cure for anarchism is freedom!